Vasudevaya
Vasudevaya
Janmadyasya yato niviyat itaratascha teso vigyaswarat
Janmadyasya yatam vayaritaratascha te swavigaswarat
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyantiyat Surayaha
Tena Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Mujanchija Suraya
Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Misha
Tejo Varimridam Jata Vinimayo Jatra Trisargum
Damna
Risa
Sena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi
Dhamna Swena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth,
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
and the
truth,
primeval cause of all causes,
and the primeval cause of all causes,
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, destruction, the manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause
It
beyond
is
him.
he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of
the
Brahmaji,
original living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
of water seen the fire, of land seen the water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe,
temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature,
appear factual although they are unreal.
appear factual although they are
I
unreal.
therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri
who is
Krishna,
eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternal existence in the transcendental
which
abode,
is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material
I
world.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitra
Dharma prajita kaitavutra,
paramo nimatsranam satam
paramo nirmasaranam,
vedyam vastavam atra vastu
vedyam vastavam astravastu,
shivadam tapatrayon mulanam
Shivadam taputroyamanam,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Kim va purir Ishwaraha
Kim va parirish,
Sadyo hridi avarudyate tra
Sadhya Rudya Varidya Titra,
Krite bihi sususabhistakshana.
Kritivhi Shishu Subhistatkana,
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are material
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, their reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of
Such
all.
truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold
As
miseries.
soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
This beautiful Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
it is called to
the
knowledge.
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
sukamukad amrita dravya samyutam,
Shuka mukhad
pibata
mritatrav
bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamayam,
muhur ahoraska bhuvibhavuka.
Mora Hora Sikhabu.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad
The
Bhagavatam.
mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit, the desired tree of Vedic glory.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishru.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all.
Shinvatam swakata Krishna,
Shrimvatam Sakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Vidyam Taksto Hi Bhadrani,
Vidyantasto Hiya Bhadrani,
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
Vidunati Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic
or to hear
literatures,
from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through Bhagavad
is
Gita.
itself righteous activity.
It is self-righteous
And
activity.
for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about
Lord
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's
acts
heart.
as the best wishing friend,
Acts as the best wishing
and purifies
friend.
his devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
And purifies the body constantly engaged in hearing.
Nasta prayesu abhadresu
Nasta praishva bhadreshu.
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam bhagavata
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati uttamasloke.
bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
Bhakti bhavati nastiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops dormant transcendental.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the
and
Bhagavatam
from the
and
devotees,
from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in the devotional service.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Dharajistamo bhava.
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhadayaschaye.
cheta itaranavidam
Chitaitaranavidam.
stivam sattve prasidati.
Sitam sadve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional
one becomes
service,
freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of
and thus
ignorance.
material lust and avarice are diminished.
And thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasannamana
Bhagavat Bhakti Yogataha
Bhagavat Bhakti Yoga
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva
Mukta
Vijnana
Sangasya Jayate.
Mukta Sangha Sajaya.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure
the
goodness,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
becomes alive by devotional
and
service,
understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate Hridaya Grantis
Vidyate Hridaya Grantis
Chidyante Sarvasamsaya
Chidyante Sarva Samshaya
Siyante Jasya Karmani
Chidyante
Drista
Chashakamani
Evatmanishvare.
Drusta Eva Manish.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the hard note of material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsham samamgrama,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
understanding the absolute truth personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from the devotee in Krishna
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Shri Guru Vastika prayers. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy.
The spiritual master received benediction from the ocean of mercy.
Just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it,
Just the clouds pour water in the fire
so the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world
to the material. Spiritual master delivered
by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence.
by extinguishing the blazing fire of material
I offer my
existence.
respectful obeisances unto such a spiritual master,
Offer my respectful obeisances to such
who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name,
chanting holy name,
dancing in ecstasy,
dancing in ecstasy,
singing and playing musical instruments.
and playing musical instruments.
The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
Spiritual master was gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya
because he
Mahaprabhu.
is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Because in version, the mellow of pure devotion.
Sometimes his hair stands on end.
Stands
He
like-
feels quivering in his body,
It's been quivering in his body,
and tears flow from his eyes like waves.
and tears flowing from his eyes like the waves.
I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
Offer my respectful obeisances to the Lord Spirit of such
The
a
spiritual master is always engaged in temple worship of Shri Radha and Govinda, and Krishna.
Engage the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna.
He also engages his disciples in such worship.
He also engages his disciples in such worship.
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
They do this in beautiful clothes and ornaments.
clean their temple,
They clean the temple
and perform similar worship of the Lord.
and perform the similar worship of the Lord.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
Offer my respectful obeisances to the Lord Spirit of such a spiritual master.
The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of food, of delicious food.
Spiritual master is always offering Christians 4 kinds of
Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked.
Jews and
When the
such.
spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada,
His spiritual master says the devotees is satisfied by eating prasad.
He is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisances to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, Verse 24. Tadasmasaram hridayam batedam
Tadashmasharam hridayam batedam
Yagriyamanayar harinamadeya
Yagriyamanayar harinamadeya
Navikriyetata yadavikaro
Navikriyetata yadavikaro
Netre jalam Ruhe Suharsha.
Netre jalam gatra ruhe suharsha.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Certainly the heart is steel framed, which, in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes, and the hairs stand on end. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. We should note with profit that in the first 3 chapters of the second canto, a gradual process of development of devotional service is being presented. In the first chapter, the first step in devotional service for God consciousness in the first chapter, the first step in devotional service for God consciousness by the process of hearing and chanting has been stressed. And a gross conception of the personality of Godhead in His universal form for the beginners is recommended. By such a gross conception of God through the material manifestations of His energy, one is enabled to spiritualize the mind and the senses and gradually concentrate the mind upon Lord Vishnu, the Supreme, who is present as the Supersoul in every heart and everywhere, in every atom of the material universe. The system of Pancha Upasana, recommending 5 mental attitudes for the common man, is also enacted for this purpose, namely gradual development, worship of the superior that may be in the form of 1. Fire, 2. Electricity, 3. The sun, 4. The master living beings, 5. Lord Shiva, and at last the impersonal Supersoul, the partial representation of Lord Vishnu. They are all nicely described in the second chapter. But in the third chapter, further development is prescribed after one has actually reached the stage of Vishnu worship, or pure devotional service, and the mature stage of Vishnu worship is suggested herein in relation to the change of heart. The whole process of spiritual culture is aimed at changing the heart of the living being in the matter of his eternal relation with the Supreme Lord as subordinate servant, which is his eternal constitutional position. So, with the progress of devotional service, the reaction of change in the heart is exhibited by gradual detachment from the sense of material enjoyment, by a false sense of lording it over the material world, and an increase in the attitude of rendering loving service to the Lord. Vidhi Bhakti, or regulated devotional service by the limbs of the body, namely the eyes, the ears, the nose, the hands, and legs, as already explained herein before, is now stressed herein in relation to the mind, which is the impetus for all activities of the limbs of the body. It is expected by all means that by discharging regulated devotional service, one must manifest the change of heart. If there is no such change, the heart must be considered steel-framed, for it is not melted even when there is chanting of the holy name of the Lord. We must always remember that hearing and chanting are the basic principles of discharging devotional duties, and if they are properly performed, there will follow the reactional ecstasy with signs of tears in the eyes and standing of the hairs on the body. These are natural consequences and are the preliminary symptoms of the bhava stage, which occurs before one reaches the perfectional stage of prema, love of Godhead. If the reaction does not take place, even after continuous hearing and chanting of the holy name of the Lord, it may be considered to be due to offenses only. That is the opinion of the Sandarbha. In the beginning of chanting of the holy name of the Lord, if the devotee has not been very careful about evading the 10 kinds of offenses at the feet of the holy name, certainly the reaction of feelings of separation will not be visible by tears in the eyes and standing of the hair on end. The bhava stage is manifested by 8 transcendental symptoms, namely inertness, perspiration, standing of hairs on end, failing in the voice, trembling, paleness of the body, tears in the eyes, and finally trance. The Nectar of Devotion, a summary study of Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, explains those symptoms and vividly describes other transcendental developments, both in steady and accelerating manifestations. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has very critically discussed all these bhava displays in connection with some unscrupulous neophytes imitating the above symptoms for cheap appreciation. Not only Vishwanath Chakravarti, but also Srila Rupa Goswami treated them very critically. Sometimes all the above 8 symptoms of ecstasy are imitated by the mundane devotees, prakrita sahajas, but the pseudo-symptoms are at once detected when one sees the pseudo-devotee addicted to so many forbidden things. Even though decorated with the signs of a devotee, a person addicted to smoking, drinking, or illegitimate sex with women cannot have all the above-mentioned ecstatic symptoms. But it is seen that sometimes these symptoms are willfully imitated, and for this reason Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti accuses the imitators of being stone-hearted men. They are sometimes even affected by the reflection of such transcendental symptoms, yet if they still do not give up the forbidden habits, then they are hopeless cases for transcendental realization. When Lord Chaitanya met Srila Ramananda Raya at Kavur, on the bank of the Godavari, the Lord developed all these symptoms, but because of the presence of some non-devotee brahmanas who were attendants of the Raya, the Lord suppressed these symptoms. So sometimes they are not visible even in the body of the first-class devotee for certain circumstantial reasons. Therefore, real, steady bhava is definitely displayed in the matter of 1. Cessation of material desires, shanti. 2. Utilization of every moment in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, avyarta kalatvam. 3. Eagerness for glorifying the Lord constantly, nama gane sada ruchi. 4. Attraction for living in the land of the Lord, pritis tad vasati stale. And 5. Complete detachment from material happiness, virakti. And 6. Pridelessness, mana sunyata. One who has developed all these transcendental qualities is really possessed of the bhava stage as distinguished from the stone-hearted imitator or mundane devotee. The whole process can be summarized as follows. The advanced devotee who chants the holy name of the Lord in a perfectly offenseless manner and is friendly to everyone can actually relish the transcendental taste of glorifying the Lord. And the result of such realization is reflected in the cessation of all material desires, etc., as mentioned above. The neophytes, due to their being in the lower stage of devotional service, are invariably envious, so much so that they invent their own ways and means of devotional regulations without following the acharyas. As such, Even if they make a show of constantly chanting the holy name of the Lord, they cannot relish the transcendental taste of the holy name. Therefore, the show of tears in the eyes, trembling, perspiration, or unconsciousness, etc., is condemned. They can, however, get in touch with the pure devotee of the Lord and rectify their bad habits. Otherwise, they shall continue to be stone-hearted and unfit for any treatment. A complete progressive march on the return path home back to Godhead will depend on the instructions of the revealed scriptures directed by a realized devotee. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Certainly, that heart is steel framed, which in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes and the hairs stand on end. So this is a very interesting purport. And what's being described here, I personally witnessed. Many years ago, this one person came and he was born in Navadip, Mayapur area. And he claimed to be a descendant of one of the Goswamis. And he was a ball. A ball means he was a member of one of the 13 Upper Siddhanta groups. That means these are false Upper Sampradaya groups, false Sampradayas. But he claimed blood lineage from one of the Goswamis. And these persons are very, let's say, proficient at chanting. So he would chant very nice ball bhajans. And he would sometimes manifest ecstatic symptoms. And so he was very, very impressive, and he seemed to be bona fide. But then I noticed that he had two very bad habits. He drank liquor and he had a girlfriend. So I was a little confused by it. Although I liked the way he chanted, it was very melodic, and then he would dance, and he played that ekta instrument, the one-stringed instrument, and he would sometimes, manifest ecstasy. But I just couldn't stomach his drinking and his girlfriend. So at first, I invited him to the temple, and he did some chanting, got everyone dancing and so forth. But then, and then we used to have our free vegetarian restaurant, so he used to come there a lot and chant and dance. But then I never invited him to the temple again. So he kept harassing me almost, saying, when are you going to invite me to the temple again? I want to come to the temple. When are you going to invite me to your Ananda Mela and this thing, that thing? So anyway, even before that, and when we were in the little house, there was, like I said, a group of Punjabis used to come to the temple a lot. And there was one grandmother that came with them. And her special performance was she would faint doing arti and be completely stretched out on the ground. Well, the temple was really small. So when she stretched out on the ground, fainted, and it'd be, her body would be moving a little bit like this, and all of a sudden it would stop moving. So the people that were with her, they would sit down around her and remain quiet, and they said, Durga Mata has entered her body. So this was a little bewildering, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want them to get upset. But I realized this whole thing was a show. Now, did she faint? Yeah, she fainted. Did she fall on the ground? Yes, she fell on the ground. Did she shake like this a little bit? Yes. But I could feel inside that this whole thing is nonsense. Right? So these are normal things in parts of India. Right? The uppas, the false sampradayas based on blood lineage from Goswamis, that may or may not be true. But that doesn't mean anything, because here Prabhupada analyzes this really wonderfully and is warning us not to be fooled. He says that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Rupa Goswami both treated such people, these who feign or imitate the ecstatic symptoms of bhava. It says that they treated them very critically. Sometimes all the above 8 symptoms of ecstasy are imitated by the mundane devotees, the Prakrita Sahajas. But the pseudo symptoms are at once detected when one sees the pseudo means false, right? Pseudo devotee addicted to so many forbidden things. There was another time I went, a friend of mine, when I visited the United States once, after being in France for a long time, a friend of mine called me up from college, and he insisted. He said, yeah, I know you're interested in spiritual life, you're practicing it, you're Hare Krishna. I want you to come and meet my guru. I said, well, who's your guru? And he gave me this name, Baba Abdul something. He was a Sufi from Sri Lanka, a Muslim Sufi. So I said, well, I don't really want to come. He said, no, you have to come, And so he kept insisting. So I said, okay, I'll come. So I went with him, and there was some little house in Philadelphia, in some neighborhood of Philadelphia, West Philadelphia. And the house was full of people. There must have been maybe 60, 70 people. So I was dressed like a devotee. I had my tilak on, my mala, my beads and everything. And I sat down with my friend. He was my very good friend. We went to college together at the University of Pennsylvania. So then the guru comes in, and he looks exactly in the role of a Muslim Sufi so-called guru, right? Long hair, beard, and dressed like something like a Sri Lankan sadhu. And he begins to talk a bunch of gibberish, nonsense, telling stories. He had all these little stories. And when he finished speaking, one of his disciples came and with a cigarette and coffee. So he takes one or two puffs from the cigarette, and then he takes some sips from the coffee. So that really puzzled me. I immediately understood this guy's complete nonsense. So then he gets up, he's going to go up to his room upstairs. But instead of doing that, he walks straight toward me. And everybody's standing up now out of respect for him. And he, everyone moves to the side, and he walks straight toward me and looks at me directly in my eyes, And then he goes like this to my bead bag, He said, "What is this?" And I said, and I put my hand in the bead bag. I said, these are japa beads. I'm chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. My guru gave me this mantra. And he said, this is not good. This is not real. And and that was it. And he goes upstairs. So then everyone stands around me and says, oh, you got the mercy of the Guru. You got the Guru's mercy. He really gave it to you. You know, what do you think? Are you okay? You know, they thought I was going to faint or something, you know, in ecstasy. You know? I said, yeah, I'm okay. And then later on, I told my friend, I said, see, this is a waste of time for me. You know, this guy's a complete imposter. He said, no, you don't know what you're saying. You know, I said, I know what I'm saying. He's an imposter. He's not a guru. He's a phony. Now, this guru was very famous at that time. And he had these books, and books full of stories, you know, Sufi stories. Anyway, these are things that are real. And they're not only the Prakriti Sahajas from Bengal, they're all over. They're followers of Durga. They're the Sufi so-called gurus. I mean, there you also have, like, you know, the Pentecostal Christians, and then you have the man gods in Christianity and in Islam. And, you know, there's just a huge list of cheaters that are going around. And you know, another time I was invited to meet. Again, I didn't want to go, but they insisted. So they wanted me to bring my instrument, and it was a Turkish so-called sadhu who came, another so-called Sufi, and there were a whole bunch of people there, and you know, the Sufis, they do this whirling dance, right? And I brought my instrument, and I know how to play that music that when they start whirling. So you know, I played my instrument, and people were dancing, and then the so-called guru, he gave initiation to a few Americans, you know, and then, you know, everyone insisted I get his book, so I got his book also. And I read the book, and it was like complete nonsense, right? But people were impressed by him, right? He was initiating people. Now, when I saw these things, I realized myself, you know, I said, why am I wasting my time going and seeing these people? I guess the only reason is to make sure that they're nonsense, and that they're actually misleading innocent people with their nonsense, and that they should be revealed. They should be castigated, actually, you know, for being such imposters. So here Prabhupada gives the real, let's say, criterion for understanding if someone has actually reached the stage of bhava, which is the preliminary stage before pure love of God. It's the initial stage of love of God, let's put it like that. So he says, he first of all gives the example of Lord Chaitanya meeting Ramananda Rai in Kavur, and talking about the most confidential subjects of Radha and Krishna, conjugal loving affairs. But before that, they met, and Lord Chaitanya, although he was feeling transcendental ecstasy, masked it. He suppressed it, because there were some non-devotee brahmanas. There are a lot of non-devotee brahmanas, unfortunately, in India. And although they practice a lot of rituals and things like that, they're not actually devotees of Vishnu or Krishna, even though they may claim to be, because their ultimate goal is to help people get elevated to the heavenly material planets where they can have enhanced sense gratification. But anyway, Prabhupada says that Lord Chaitanya suppressed these symptoms of ecstasy. So sometimes, he says, they are not visible even in the body of the first-class devotee for certain circumstantial reasons. Therefore, real steady bhava is definitely displayed in the matter of cessation of material desires, Shanti 1. Utilization of every moment in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, Avyarta Kalatvam 2. Eagerness for glorifying the Lord constantly, Namagane Sadaruchi 3. Attraction for living in the land of the Lord, Pritistad Vasati Shtale 4. Complete detachment from material happiness, Virakti 5. And pridelessness, Manasunyata. One who has developed all these transcendental qualities is really possessed of the Bhava stage, as distinguished from the stone-hearted imitator or mundane devotee. Now, this is extremely important for us to understand, because you're gonna see as you go on in Krishna consciousness, especially if you're a preacher and you're going here and there and trying to preach, you're going to see these imitators eventually. And most people are going to be bewildered by them and believe that they are bona fide. And if you say something, they're going to say, oh, you're just envious and blah, 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 blah. But it's a fact that we should be able to recognize when there is a deviance from pure Krishna consciousness and not be fooled by it. Otherwise, we're going to be bewildered also. Just like, this is another true story. There was this one French devotee, and he thought that he was a great preacher. So there was some meeting of these Mayavadis, some public program of Mayavadis, and he went there with the purpose of trying to convince the person who was who was the principal speaker at that program, convince him to become a devotee. So he went there by himself, which is not proper, because especially brahmacharis should never go alone outside the temple. And he goes there, and after the person finished his lecture, he goes up to him and wants to have a private talk with him. And during the private talk, he starts trying to preach to him. And the Mayavadi was very respectful. He listened to him a little bit. And then he started to quote all kinds of Sanskrit mantras and verses, and completely bewildered the devotee, who gave up being Krishna conscious and joined him. Yeah, because Mayavadis are not stupid. You know, they sometimes they know the Shastras better than we do, you know, or at least there's so many different Shastras, right? So they can quote from all these other Shastras in pure Sanskrit and bewilder the neophyte devotee, you know, who realized that, you know, he was dealing with someone who was highly educated in Vedic knowledge. It doesn't mean they're a pure devotee, but they're educated in the Vedic knowledge, and they can quote so many Shastras and give explanations, word-for-word explanations of the verses and like that. So it's bewildering for a person who is not mature in Krishna consciousness. So these type of things, I actually witnessed all these things, and he suddenly realized, you know, that Prabhupada is training us. If we don't read and hear and discuss this Srimad Bhagvatam, we're going to be tricked very easily. See? So he gives all this information now, how to understand what is real bhava, right? Minus all the ecstatic symptoms, because devotees do not purposely show their ecstasies for different reasons. Like Prabhupada himself, very seldom did he go into a state of ecstasy. And when he did, he would stop and excuse himself. Because it's a very private thing. Even Lord Chaitanya, he never, or he very, very seldom exhibited ecstatic symptoms in public, other than chanting, ecstatically. But going into these different states of transcendental ecstasy, it was suppressed. Just like here it says he suppressed it in front of Ramananda Rai's non-devotee brahmanas. So, and then, but he did manifest ecstatic symptoms when he was in private with Ramananda Roy. Now, normally, we're not supposed to hear these things, but Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he apologizes. He says, normally I shouldn't write down these things, but I want to do it for the sincere devotees who are going to read this Chaitanya Charitamrita, because they will understand. So, therefore, when you, and by the way, sometimes people used to not criticize, but belittle Srila Prabhupada and say, well, he only gave the foundational basis of Krishna consciousness, but he didn't give the edifice, the skyscraper of pure love of God. He only gave the ABC. That's a bunch of nonsense also. And those are envious people that say that. You read Chaitanya Charitamrita, everything is there. From the beginning of Krishna consciousness to the ultimate pinnacle of Krishna consciousness, of ecstatic symptoms of love of God that are exhibited by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees. So all these type of narratives are to diminish the position of Prabhupada and put forward some phony, or if not phony, but put forward some other guru. But if you actually sit down patiently day after day and hear Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll see that Prabhupada has given us everything to go back to Godhead. And he hasn't held back. And he's revealing a lot of confidential things that normally neophyte devotees shouldn't hear. But he's confident that if you start from the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Ishopanishad, and then Srimad Bhagavatam, Nectar of Devotion, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and not try and skip, but go step by step, verse by verse, all knowledge was going to be revealed. The knowledge of the nonsense and the knowledge of the transcendental, pure devotional service. So we'll stop right there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Any questions?
So Maharaj, just more of a practically, like you were able to discern and distinguish between most of these people. So you read. So you were able to distinguish between the fake versus the real, because all your stories are amazing. It's and all of them happened. So were these in the early stages of your?
Yeah.
So did you already go through and study Prabhupada's books by then, or
no.
how?
Because we have 4 regulative principles, right? So if someone is going to violate those, even though they chant ecstatically, and go into swoon and faint or whatever, that's what Prabhupada says. He says, sometimes all the 8 symptoms of ecstasy are imitated by the mundane devotees, prakriti sahajas. But the pseudo-symptoms are at once detected when one sees the pseudo-devotee addicted to so many forbidden things. So this also happened in ISKCON. There was this one devotee who was a very good friend of mine, and he was a guru. He had all the titles in ISKCON, and he had many, many disciples, and he was a very nice person and a very good preacher. One day, there was this shocking news that he had attained pure love of Krishna, prema bhakti. And then there was a tape of him chanting Hare Krishna. And everyone was saying, you have to come immediately and associate with him. He was in England and experienced this supreme ecstasy of Maharaj. So it was like a little bit bewildering. But then we heard the tape. and the tape of him chanting, you know, he goes, Hari, like that, you know. And this was like his ecstasy. Well, you know, I mean, immediately I could understand, you know, that he went off his rocker somehow or other, right? And he was my dear friend, you know. Every time I'd go to England, he'd insist I stay with him, and he would treat me with all respect, and we were very close friends, you know. So I realized something strange had happened to him, you know. I mean, so I sent a letter to him, and I said, look, sometimes great warriors are injured, you know. Just like Pradyumna, he was injured on the battlefield, and his servant took him away somewhere so that he could heal and then go back to the battle. I said, something has happened to you. I said, why don't you come and stay with me for, you know, a couple of weeks or a month or several months, you know, and then when you get better, then you can go back, you know. But he never answered me. It turns out that he was so anxious to become the first devotee in ISKCON to attain prema bhakti that he started taking LSD secretly. And sitting on the Vyasadana and chanting like this, like a fool, right? And a lot of devotees got convinced that he had attained pure love of God. But see, we know somebody who has pure love of God, Srila Prabhupada. He never chanted like that, right? And he never acted like that. So, I mean, the rest of his story is horrible. You know, he eventually got his head cut off. Anyway, I won't go into the whole story. But, you see, we cannot be intimidated or bewildered by these cheaters, right? But if you're a cheater, then you'll be intimidated and bewildered by a cheater. See, if you have a cheating propensity, then you'll be attracted to people like that. And they were attracted to this person. And they followed him when he left ISKCON. And I met one person I knew very well who followed him, my good friend. And he told me that he sat with my friend, this person who deviated, and took LSD about 10, 15 times with him to attain pure devotional service. And he said, rather than getting pure devotional service, I got diarrhea and a headache. You know, so we cannot, see, if you follow the regulative principles sincerely and chant, then you'll be able to recognize when someone is deviating. And because this is the point, he says, when one sees the pseudo-devotee addicted to so many forbidden things, that's the point. And they'll make excuses how, you know, they're transcendental, they can, these things are not important, what's important is the ecstasy, blah, 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 blah. You know. Haribol.